The stadium lights died without warning. For one terrifying second, the entire arena drowned in darkness while 50,000 fans screamed into the cold Seoul night, their voices echoing like a tidal wave crashing against steel walls. Then came the sound, a sharp metallic crash backstage, followed by someone shouting Jungkook's name. Jimin's heartbeat stopped. Jungkook, the giant LED screens flickered violently overhead, casting broken flashes of blue and white across the stage. Smoke from the final pyrotechnics still hung thick in the air, smelling like burned wires and rain. Staff members ran in every direction. Cameras swung wildly. Security guards pushed through the chaos, but Jimin saw only one thing: Jungkook was gone. Just seconds earlier, he had been standing beside him during the encore, laughing breathlessly while fans chanted their names in deafening waves. Now there was nothing but an empty space where Jungkook had been. Fear wrapped around Jimin's ribs so tightly he could barely breathe. He jumped off the edge of the stage before anyone could stop him. A manager yelled behind him. He ignored it. The backstage corridor was chaos incarnate. Wires scattered across the floor, flashing emergency lights staining the walls red, staff shouting over each other in panic. Somewhere nearby, a monitor sparked violently, crackling like fireworks. Then Jimin heard it, a low groan. His head snapped toward the storage area near the loading dock. Jungkook, silence. Rain hammered against the metal roof overhead, deafening and relentless. Jimin shoved past a stack of equipment cases and froze. Jungkook was sitting on the floor against the wall, one hand pressed tightly against his shoulder while blood seeped slowly through the fabric of his black stage jacket. For a moment, Jimin couldn't move. The world narrowed into tunnel vision. Jungkook looked up weakly, wet strands of dark hair sticking to his forehead. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. Jimin dropped beside him instantly. "Are you insane? You're bleeding. It's nothing. That is clearly not nothing." Jungkook winced as Jimin touched his shoulder. Beneath his fingers, Jimin could feel trembling muscles and warmth spreading through soaked fabric. Someone had sabotaged the lighting rig. That realization hit Jimin all at once, the broken metal beam lying nearby, the fallen cables, the timing of the blackout. This wasn't an accident. Jungkook noticed the fear in Jimin's eyes immediately. "Tell the others," he muttered quietly. Jimin stared at him in disbelief. "You could have died." "I didn't. That's not the point." For a second, frustration flashed across Jungkook's face, but underneath it was exhaustion. Real exhaustion. The kind Jungkook always hid behind smiles and jokes and endless rehearsals. Jimin knew that looked too well, because Jungkook had been hiding things for months. The silence between them thickened. Outside, thunder shook the building hard enough to rattle the walls. Jimin swallowed carefully. "How long have you been overworking yourself?" Jungkook looked away. That alone was answer enough. Jimin felt anger rise in his chest, not at Jungkook, but at everything surrounding him. The schedules, the pressure, the cameras that never stopped watching, the impossible expectations, and the fact Jungkook kept carrying it all alone. "You think you have to protect everyone," Jimin whispered. Jungkook laughed bitterly. "That's my job." "No," Jimin said immediately. "It's not." For the first time that night, Jungkook's expression cracked, just slightly. But Jimin saw it, the fear, not fear of injury, fear of becoming a burden. It made Jimin's chest ache. Ever since debut, Jungkook had always been the one people leaned on, the golden Maknae who smiled through pain, practiced until sunrise, and apologized whenever he needed rest. He carried expectations like chains wrapped around his lungs, and lately those chains were suffocating him. "You haven't slept properly in weeks," Jimin continued softly. "You barely eat after rehearsals. You keep saying you're fine even when your hands are shaking." Stayed silent. Rainwater dripped steadily from the ceiling nearby, hitting concrete in slow rhythmic taps. Finally, Jungkook spoke. "What if I stopped being enough?" The words came out so quietly Jimin almost didn't hear them, but they shattered something inside him. Jungkook never admitted fear, not openly, not like this. Jimin looked at him carefully, noticing details he had ignored for too long. The dark circles hidden beneath makeup, the tiny tremor in Jungkook's fingers, the way he kept pressing his lips together like he was holding himself together by force alone. "You idiot," Jimin whispered. Jungkook blinked in surprise. "You think people love you because you never break?" Jimin's voice shook slightly. "That's not why He stopped himself too late. Jungkook's eyes lifted slowly. The unfinished sentence lingered heavily between them. Jimin felt heat rush into his face despite the cold air. Outside, fans were still chanting somewhere in the distance, unaware of the storm unfolding backstage. Jungkook stared at him silently, then he asked the question Jimin had spent years avoiding. "Why do you stay with me?" Jimin's breath caught, because the answer terrified him. He could endure rumors, scandals, obsessive cameras, endless scrutiny, but not this vulnerability. Not standing inches away from Jungkook while the entire world seemed to disappear around them, Jimin looked down briefly, trying to steady himself. "When everyone else sees Jungkook," he said softly, "I see the person who stays awake until 4 a.m. because he's afraid of disappointing people." Jungkook's expression faltered. "I see someone who acts fearless even when he's exhausted." The rain intensified violently overhead. "And I see someone who keeps giving pieces of himself away until there's almost nothing left." Jungkook's eyes glistened under the flickering emergency lights. Jimin's voice became quieter. "That's why I stay." Of them moved. The space between them suddenly felt dangerously small. Jungkook looked at him like he was hearing something impossible. Then footsteps echoed down the hallway. Staff members were searching nearby. Jimin immediately grabbed Jungkook's hand and pulled him behind the equipment shelves before anyone could see them. Their bodies collided awkwardly in the narrow space. Jungkook inhaled sharply. Jimin could feel his heartbeat through the thin fabric of his shirt, fast, unsteady, so close. Voices passed only a few feet away. Check the west corridor. Management's looking everywhere. Flashlights swept briefly across the room before disappearing again. Jimin didn't realize he was still holding Jungkook's hand until Jungkook tightened his fingers slightly. Not to pull away, to hold on. The realization made Jimin's pulse stumble. For years, their relationship had existed inside unfinished sentences and lingering glances. Hidden gestures, quiet loyalty, feelings buried beneath fame and fear. But tonight something had shifted. Danger had stripped away the distance between them. And maybe Jungkook felt it too, because when the corridor finally fell silent again, he didn't let go. Instead, he looked directly at Jimin and whispered, almost helplessly, "You're the reason I keep surviving all of this." Froze completely. Jungkook lowered his eyes immediately afterward, as if the confession had escaped accidentally, but it was too late. Jimin had heard it, every word. The air between them became unbearably heavy, emotional. Fragile. Jimin's chest tightened so painfully he thought it might actually break. Slowly, carefully, he reached up and brushed damp hair away from Jungkook's forehead. "You don't have to survive everything alone anymore," he whispered back. Jungkook looked at him then, not like an idol, not like a superstar standing in sold-out arenas, just Jungkook, tired, scared, human, and for the first time in years, his walls finally began to fall apart. Outside, thunder rolled across the city while thousands of fans waited for answers. But backstage, hidden from cameras and expectations, Jungkook finally allowed himself to lean against Jimin's shoulder and close his eyes, as if that was the only place in the world he truly felt safe. Jungkook woke to the sound of sirens somewhere beyond the arena walls. For a few disoriented seconds, he didn't remember where he was, then warmth brushed against his shoulder. Jimin. The realization hit slowly. Jungkook's head was resting against him. The backstage storage room had fallen strangely quiet after the chaos outside faded into distant noise. Emergency lights still blinked weakly above them, painting the cramped space in pulses of red and shadow. Rain continued pounding the building, softer now, like exhaustion settling over the city. Jimin hadn't moved at all. His back pressed against the cold wall while Jungkook leaned against him half asleep, injured shoulder wrapped hastily with a towel someone had left nearby. "You should have woken me up," Jungkook murmured hoarsely. Jimin looked down immediately. "You finally fell asleep." Jungkook tried to sit up, but pain shot through his shoulder hard enough to make him inhale sharply. Jimin's voice turned firm instantly. "The medic said you strained the muscle badly. You brought a medic here, obviously." Jungkook rubbed tiredly at his face with his free hand. "The company's going to panic. They already are." A faint smile almost appeared on Jungkook's lips before disappearing again. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy. Jimin kept stealing glances at him every few seconds, as if afraid Jungkook might disappear again the moment he looked away. Jungkook noticed. "You're staring. You scared me." Honesty in Jimin's voice made Jungkook look down quietly. Because he knew it was true. When the lighting rig collapsed earlier, Jungkook had genuinely thought for one horrible second that he wouldn't make it out in time. The crashing metal, the sparks exploding overhead, staff screaming, and somehow his first thought hadn't been fear, it had been Jimin. Jungkook hated that, not because the feeling itself was bad, but because it was dangerous. Everything about them had become dangerous lately. The lingering touches during rehearsals. The way Jimin instinctively searched for him in crowded rooms. The late-night conversations that drifted too personal, too vulnerable, too honest. People had started noticing, fans noticed everything, and rumors spread faster than wildfire. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly. He could still remember the articles from months ago. Headlines dissecting every glance between them. Videos slowed down frame by frame. Strangers pretending they understood emotions Jungkook himself barely understood. It was suffocating, not because the rumors existed, but because part of him feared they were true. Jimin suddenly stood. "Getting water." Jungkook could respond. Jimin slipped out through the side door into the empty hallway. The moment he disappeared, the room felt colder. Jungkook leaned his head back against the wall slowly. He was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Physically, yes, but deeper than that too. Fame had become a constant performance. Every smile analyzed. Every mistake immortalized online forever. Every emotion filtered through cameras before it even belonged to him anymore. And somewhere along the way, Jungkook had forgotten how to separate himself from the version people expected. Except around Jimin. Jimin still looked at him like a person that terrified him more than anything. The door creaked open again several minutes later, but it was Jimin. Jungkook's posture immediately stiffened. Their manager stepped inside quietly, his expression unreadable. "There you are." Jungkook sat up straighter despite the pain. "Hyung, you disappeared during a stadium emergency," the manager interrupted carefully. "Do you realize how serious this is?" Jungkook lowered his gaze. The manager sighed heavily and shut the door behind him. "We told the media it was a technical malfunction." So nobody knows about the sabotage? No, Jungkook's eyes lifted sharply. You confirmed it. The manager hesitated, then nodded once. A cold feeling slid down Jungkook's spine. Someone had intentionally tampered with the equipment. This wasn't random. And judging by the tension in the manager's face, the company already suspected more than they were admitting. Security found cut wires backstage, he said quietly. Police are investigating. Jungkook's stomach tightened. Outside the arena, fans were probably still posting videos, speculating, panicking. Meanwhile, the truth sat hidden behind closed doors. The manager's expression softened slightly. Jimin's worried sick. The mention of his name, Jungkook looked away again. That alone told the manager more than enough. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the manager said carefully, "You need to be more cautious." Jungkook frowned faintly. "About what?" A pause, then, "The way you look at him." The words landed like a physical blow. Jungkook froze completely. The manager didn't elaborate further, but he didn't need to, because suddenly Jungkook remembered every moment he'd failed to hide it. Watching Jimin laugh during rehearsals, reaching for him unconsciously in crowds, looking for him first after every performance, the truth had been leaking out of him piece by piece, and people were starting to notice. Jungkook swallowed hard. "We're just close." The manager's eyes softened with something almost sympathetic. "That's not what I said." Jungkook could answer. The door opened again. Jimin stepped inside carrying 2 water bottles. The moment he noticed the manager, he stopped. Tension instantly filled the room. Jimin's gaze flickered briefly between them, sensing immediately that something serious had been discussed. "You okay?" he asked Jungkook softly. Jungkook nodded too quickly, too automatically. Jimin narrowed his eyes slightly. He knew Jungkook too well. The manager stood and adjusted his jacket. "The cars are ready downstairs." Then after a brief hesitation, he added quietly, "Be careful tonight." The words felt directed at both of them. Once he left, silence returned immediately. Jimin walked over slowly and handed Jungkook a bottle of water. "What happened?" "Nothing. That's a lie." Looked away. Jimin crouched in front of him suddenly, forcing their eyes level. Jungkook, the softness in his voice almost hurt. Jungkook's composure cracked before he could stop it. "He thinks people are noticing us." Jimin stilled. Outside, thunder rumbled low across the city again. For several seconds, Jimin said nothing at all. Then he asked quietly, "Are you scared?" Jungkook laughed weakly, but there was no humor in it. Jimin looked down briefly. The truth was complicated, because yes, there were reasons to be afraid. The media scrutiny alone could destroy people. Rumors could turn vicious overnight. World loved idols only until they became human. But when Jimin looked at Jungkook sitting there injured and exhausted and trying so hard to hide how deeply he felt things, fear suddenly seemed smaller than regret. Jimin reached out carefully and took Jungkook's hand again. This time neither of them pretended it was accidental. "I'm scared too," Jimin admitted softly. Jungkook's breathing slowed, but Jimin hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You're still the first person I look for in every room." Something fragile broke open inside Jungkook then. Years of restraint, years of silence, years of pretending certain feelings didn't exist. Jungkook lowered his head suddenly, shoulders trembling once. Jimin's expression immediately changed. But Jungkook covered his eyes with one hand before Jimin could fully see his face. And that frightened Jimin more than tears would have, because Jungkook never let himself fall apart in front of people. Never. Jimin moved closer instinctively. "You don't have to hold everything in anymore." Jungkook's voice came out rough. "If I start talking, I don't think I'll stop." Jimin's chest tightened painfully. "Then don't stop." The words slipped out before he could think. Jungkook slowly lowered his hand. His eyes were shining under the dim emergency lights. And when he looked at Jimin this time, there was nothing guarded left in them anymore. Only honesty, raw and terrifying and impossible to take back. "You're the most important person in my life." Forgot how to breathe. The confession hung between them in complete silence. No cameras, no audience, no stage lights. Just 2 exhausted people sitting on a cold backstage floor while rain swallowed the city outside. Jimin's heartbeat pounded violently against his ribs, because Jungkook had finally said it aloud, and now nothing between them would ever feel the same again.
Jimin couldn't speak. The words lingered in the air between them like something alive, fragile enough to shatter if either of them moved too quickly. "You're the most important person in my life." Jungkook's confession echoed inside Jimin's chest louder than the storm outside. For years, Jimin had imagined what it would feel like to hear something like that from him. In quiet hotel rooms after concerts, during sleepless flights across continents, in fleeting moments where Jungkook looked at him too softly before turning away again. But reality felt nothing like imagination. Reality was terrifying, because Jungkook wasn't joking, wasn't hiding behind teasing smiles or playful excuses. He meant it, completely. Jimin stared at him in silence while emergency lights flickered red across Jungkook's face, illuminating the vulnerability he tried so desperately to hide from the world. And suddenly Jimin understood something painful. Jungkook had probably been carrying this alone for a very long time. "You shouldn't say things like that so easily," Jimin whispered finally. Jungkook gave a faint, exhausted laugh. Easy. His voice cracked slightly. That was the hardest thing I've ever said. Jimin's chest tightened. The honesty in Jungkook's eyes made it impossible to look away. Outside the storage room, distant footsteps echoed through backstage corridors while staff continued cleaning up the aftermath of the accident. Somewhere nearby, metal equipment clattered against concrete floors. Faint voices carried through the walls, but inside that room, everything felt strangely suspended in time. Jimin lowered his gaze briefly, because the truth was, he didn't know how to survive this conversation without breaking apart too. For years, he had carefully controlled every emotion around Jungkook. Every lingering glance, every instinctive touch, every dangerous moment where affection threatened to become something impossible to hide. Not because he was ashamed, never that, but because loving someone inside a world built on scrutiny felt like standing in the middle of a hurricane while pretending the wind wasn't destroying you. And Jungkook had always been his weakness. Jimin inhaled slowly. You really don't realize what you do to people, he murmured. Jungkook frowned faintly. What does that mean? It means... Jimin stopped himself, frustrated. How could he explain this without sounding completely insane? How could he explain the way his heart reacted every time Jungkook smiled at him like he mattered more than anyone else? Or how terrifying it felt whenever Jungkook looked exhausted but still searched crowds until he found Jimin standing there? Jimin laughed softly under his breath. You make people want to protect you. Jungkook's eyes softened immediately. You're always the one protecting me, he said quietly. The words hit harder than they should have. Because it was true. Jimin had spent years quietly orbiting around Jungkook's storms, catching pieces of him before they shattered completely. Covering for him when anxiety stole his sleep. Sitting beside him during silent breakdowns no cameras ever saw. Memorizing every small habit Jungkook had when he was overwhelmed. Like the way he rubbed his thumb against his wrist absent-mindedly when stressed. Or how he went unusually quiet when something was really wrong. Jimin noticed everything, always. And maybe that was the problem. Jungkook shifted slightly, wincing again from his injured shoulder. Immediately, Jimin moved closer. Careful! Their faces ended up inches apart, too close. The air changed instantly. Neither of them moved. Jungkook's breathing slowed almost imperceptibly while Jimin felt his own pulse begin racing out of control. Rain tapped steadily against the metal walls around them, soft, rhythmic, dangerously intimate. Jimin could smell smoke from the ruined stage equipment lingering faintly in Jungkook's clothes beneath the cleaner scent of rainwater. And suddenly the room felt far too small. Jungkook looked at him carefully, like he was trying to memorize every expression crossing Jimin's face. What are you thinking about? He asked quietly. Jimin hesitated, then made the mistake of answering honestly. That I should probably stop looking at you like this. Jungkook's breath caught. Jimin immediately realized what he had admitted. But it was too late now. The silence afterward became unbearable, heavy with years of things unsaid. Jungkook swallowed slowly. How do you look at me? Jimin laughed once in disbelief. You really want me to answer that? Yes. The single word came out almost painfully soft. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. He could feel himself losing control of every boundary he had built over the years, but maybe tonight had already destroyed those boundaries anyway. When he opened his eyes again, Jungkook was still watching him with terrifying patience. So Jimin finally whispered the truth. Like you're the first place that ever felt like home. Jungkook stopped breathing for a second, completely still. Then his eyes lowered as emotion flashed across his face so openly it made Jimin's chest ache. Neither of them noticed how close they had drifted until Jungkook's forehead nearly brushed Jimin's. The space between them disappeared slowly, carefully. Like both of them were afraid the moment would vanish if they moved too fast. Jimin's heart pounded violently. Jungkook looked terrified, not of Jimin, of what this meant. Years of friendship balanced on the edge of something irreversible. And yet neither of them pulled away. Outside, another burst of thunder shook the building. Then suddenly, the storage room door slammed open. Both of them jumped apart instantly. Their manager stood frozen in the doorway, breathing hard as if he had rushed back upstairs. For one horrible second, nobody spoke. The tension in the room became suffocating. Jimin stood too quickly while Jungkook looked away immediately, jaw tightening. The manager's expression shifted almost imperceptibly as he took in the scene. Then he closed the door behind him slowly. There's a problem. His voice sounded grim enough to erase everything else instantly. Jungkook straightened. What happened? The manager hesitated, then held up his phone. On the screen was a blurry photo already spreading online. A photo of Jimin holding Jungkook backstage moments earlier after the accident, and the caption underneath was already going viral. The internet had started asking questions. Again, the room fell silent except for the rain. Jimin stared at the phone screen while his stomach slowly dropped. The photo was grainy, taken from far away through backstage fencing near the loading dock, but it was clear enough to recognize them instantly. Jungkook leaning weakly against the wall. Jimin crouched in front of him, gripping his face with both hands in panic. The image itself wasn't scandalous, but emotion was, and people online noticed emotion faster than anything else. The caption beneath the photo spread across thousands of reposts already. Why does Jimin look like he's about to lose him? Jungkook looked away first, not because he was ashamed. Because fear had finally reached him too, their manager rubbed tiredly at his forehead. The company's trying to contain it. Contain what? Jimin snapped suddenly. A picture, the speculation. Laughed bitterly under his breath, speculation. Such a harmless word for something capable of destroying people. He knew how quickly narratives spread online. One photo became 100 edited videos. 100 videos became headlines. Headlines became accusations, obsession, harassment. People stopped seeing humans and started seeing stories they could consume. Jungkook sat very still beside him, too still. Jimin recognized that silence immediately. It meant Jungkook was spiraling internally. We should leave separately, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin turned toward him instantly. What? It'll calm things down. Injured? Be fine. No, you won't. Jungkook finally looked up, frustration flashing behind his exhaustion. Jimin, what? You know how this works. Jimin hated that he did. Idols survived by controlling perception. Every movement calculated. Every appearance managed carefully enough to avoid giving the public something to tear apart. And right now the public smelled blood in the water. The manager exhaled slowly. Security, preparing a private exit downstairs. Jimin crossed his arms tightly. I'm not leaving him alone. Jungkook's expression softened for just a second before he forced distance back into his face again. That's exactly why people are talking. The words stung more than Jimin expected, because underneath them was something unspoken. We can't keep doing this openly. Jimin lowered his gaze briefly. He understood the reality better than anyone. Still, something inside him rebelled against it violently. Because only an hour ago he had thought Jungkook might actually die beneath collapsing steel beams backstage, and now they were discussing public image management like none of that mattered. It made Jimin feel sick. The manager's phone buzzed again. His expression darkened immediately after reading the notification. What now? Jungkook asked. A Sassing posted another angle. Jimin's heart sank. The manager hesitated before turning the screen toward them again. This photo was worse, much worse. Taken through the partially opened storage room door earlier, Jungkook leaning against Jimin's shoulder with his eyes closed, Jimin's hand in Jungkook's hair. The intimacy was impossible to explain away. Silence crashed into the room. Even Jungkook looked shaken now. Jimin felt cold all over, not because the photo existed, because the expression on Jungkook's face in it looked heartbreakingly safe, like he had forgotten the world entirely for one reckless moment. The manager spoke carefully. The company can deny rumors. But if more photos surface... I know, Jungkook interrupted quietly. Jimin looked at him immediately. Jungkook's face had gone unreadable again. That scared Jimin more than panic would have. Whenever Jungkook shut down emotionally, it meant he was preparing to sacrifice something. And Jimin already knew what that something would be: distance. Jungkook stood slowly despite the pain in his shoulder. Jimin moved instinctively to help him, but Jungkook stepped back first. The movement was subtle, still gentle, still polite. But it hurt anyway. Jimin's chest tightened painfully. Jungkook, we should go before this gets worse. The words sounded mechanical, rehearsed, not because Jungkook meant them, because he was forcing himself to. Jimin suddenly felt angry, not at Jungkook, at the situation, at the invisible cage built around them for years, at the fact people demanded authenticity from idols while punishing them for being human. You almost got crushed tonight, Jimin said quietly. And your first concern is rumors. Jungkook looked exhausted. Concern is protecting everyone. You go again. Frustration in Jimin's voice surprised even himself. Jungkook frowned faintly. You think hurting yourself protects people? That's not what I'm doing. Yes, it is. The room became unbearably tense. The manager wisely stepped toward the hallway, pretending to take another phone call while giving them privacy. Jimin took a shaky breath. You always do this, he whispered. You decide what's best for everyone and carry it alone until you break. Jungkook's jaw tightened slightly. And you always try to save me. Somebody has to. The words escaped harsher than intended. Jungkook looked genuinely wounded by them. Immediately guilt crashed into Jimin's anger. But before he could apologize, Jungkook spoke first. You think I don't notice? He asked quietly. Jimin blinked. Notice what? The way you watch me all the time. Froze. Jungkook laughed softly, though there was sadness buried underneath it. You notice every little thing about me before I even say anything. His eyes lowered briefly. Sometimes it feels like you know me better than I know myself. Jimin's heartbeat became uneven, because he did. And maybe Jungkook knew that too. The rain outside intensified again, rattling violently against the building windows. Jungkook looked toward the dark hallway before speaking again, voice almost lost beneath the storm. That's why this is dangerous. Swallowed hard. This. Jungkook looked directly at him then, not avoiding it anymore, not pretending. Us. The word hit like a physical impact. Years of hidden feelings suddenly condensed into a single syllable hanging between them. Us. Jimin felt his throat tighten painfully. Neither friendship nor confession could fully contain what existed between them anymore, and they both knew it. Jungkook stepped closer again slowly, close enough for Jimin to see exhaustion written beneath his eyes. Close enough to hear the slight tremor in his breathing. I don't know how to stop caring about you, Jungkook admitted quietly. Jimin's vision blurred for a second, because that was it, the truth stripped bare, no ambiguity left, no excuses, just honesty raw and frightening and irreversible. Jimin looked at him helplessly. You think I know how? For the first time that night, Jungkook smiled properly, small, sad, beautiful enough to break Jimin's heart instantly. Then his expression softened completely. And before Jimin could process what was happening, Jungkook lifted his uninjured hand carefully and touched Jimin's cheek. The gesture was unbelievably gentle. Jimin stopped breathing. Jungkook's thumb brushed lightly beneath his eye, lingering there for one dangerous second too long. You're shaking, Jungkook whispered. Jimin laughed weakly. Whose fault is that? A quiet laugh escaped Jungkook too. The sound felt painfully intimate in the dim room. For a moment, everything outside disappeared again. The rumors, the cameras, the expectations crushing down around them. There was only this, only them. Only years of emotions finally surfacing after being buried alive for too long. Jimin's eyes dropped briefly to Jungkook's lips before he could stop himself. The moment stretched, fragile, electric. Then suddenly voices echoed sharply down the hallway outside. Security teams here. They found the person who leaked the photos. Reality slammed back into place instantly. Jungkook stepped away first this time, but the look in his eyes remained. And somehow that hurt even more. Because now Jimin knew with terrifying certainty, Jungkook loved him too.
3 days later, Seoul was drowning in rumors. Everywhere Jungkook looked, there were headlines, videos, speculations dissected frame by millions of strangers pretending they understood emotions they had only witnessed through screens. Fans argued endlessly online. Some defended them, some mocked them, some demanded answers as if idols owed the world ownership over their hearts. The company released vague statements calling the backstage incident a technical accident, but the leaked photos spread faster than damage control ever could. And through all of it, Jungkook disappeared. No live streams, no posts, no appearances, nothing. The silence only made the internet louder. But hidden far away from cameras, inside a quiet riverside hotel outside the city, Jungkook sat alone on the balcony at nearly 2 a.m. while rain fell softly over the Han River. He hadn't slept properly since the concert. Not because of the rumors, because of Jimin. Because every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the expression on Jimin's face backstage, the fear, the relief, the honesty trembling in his voice. And worse, the look in Jimin's eyes right before they almost kissed. Jungkook leaned forward slowly, elbows resting against his knees. The city lights reflected weakly in the dark water below. For years he had convinced himself he could endure anything if he stayed silent enough. Pressure, loneliness, exhaustion, love, especially love, because loving someone publicly while belonging to millions of people privately felt impossible. But lately silence hurt more than truth. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Jungkook already knew who it was before the door even opened. Jimin stepped quietly onto the balcony, hands buried inside the pockets of an oversized hoodie. His dark hair was still slightly damp from the rain outside. For several seconds neither of them spoke. The atmosphere between them had changed completely after backstage. There was no pretending left anymore. Jimin walked over slowly and sat beside him, close, not touching, but close enough for Jungkook to feel warmth radiating from him against the cold night air. "You should be resting," Jimin murmured softly. Jungkook smiled faintly without looking up. "You sound like my doctor." "Terrible at listening." "That's true." Settled again, comfortable this time, rain tapped gently against the balcony railing while distant traffic hummed somewhere below the sleeping city. Jimin looked at Jungkook carefully. The exhaustion was still there beneath his eyes, but something else had changed too. The walls were gone. For the first time in years, Jungkook looked emotionally exposed in a way Jimin had never seen before, fragile, honest, human. And maybe that was why Jimin's chest hurt so much just looking at him. "You scared me that night," Jimin admitted quietly. Jungkook's expression softened immediately. "I know, no," Jimin whispered. "I don't think you do." Jungkook finally turned toward him. Jimin's eyes glistened faintly under the city lights. When that beam fell, he inhaled shakily. "I thought I lost you." The rawness in his voice shattered whatever remained of Jungkook's defenses. Without thinking, Jungkook reached for his hand. Jimin held on instantly. Neither of them looked away this time. No fear, no hesitation, only truth. "Sorry," Jungkook whispered. Jimin shook his head slowly. "You don't have to apologize for being tired." The words hit harder than Jungkook expected. Because exhaustion had followed him for years like a shadow, he pretended not to notice. But Jimin always noticed, always. Jungkook laughed weakly under his breath. "You know what the worst part is?" "What?" "I think I got so used to surviving that I forgot how to live." Jimin's fingers tightened slightly around his. Rain drifted sideways in the cold wind, carrying the faint scent of wet pavement and distant river water. Then Jimin smiled sadly. "Then let me help you remember." Jungkook looked at him in complete silence, and suddenly every loud thing in his life became meaningless. The stadiums, the fame, the endless noise. None of it mattered as much as this quiet moment beside the person who had stayed beside him through every broken piece of himself. Jungkook felt emotion rise painfully into his throat. "You really never left," he said softly. Jimin's eyes warmed instantly. "Of course I didn't." The simplicity of the answer nearly broke him. Because Jimin had chosen him over and over again for years without asking for anything in return, even when Jungkook pushed people away, even when fear made him distant. Even when the entire world became too heavy to carry, Jimin stayed. And for the first time, Jungkook stopped running from what that meant. He turned fully toward him, heartbeat loud enough to drown out the rain. Then quietly, almost trembling, Jungkook finally said the words he had buried for far too long. "You're the most important person in my life, Jimin." Jimin's breath caught, not because he hadn't heard it before, but because this time Jungkook wasn't afraid anymore. The confession settled softly between them beneath the city lights. Real, certain, free. Jimin's eyes filled instantly with emotion he could no longer hide. "You idiot," he whispered shakily. Jungkook laughed quietly through tears threatening to appear. "I know." Jimin reached up carefully and touched his face like he was holding something precious. Then finally, after years of unfinished feelings and restrained emotions, Jimin leaned forward and kissed him, softly, slowly. Like both of them understood exactly how long this moment had waited to exist. Jungkook's eyes closed immediately. The world disappeared. No cameras, no headlines, no expectations, only warmth, only rain, only the quiet feeling of finally arriving somewhere after being lost for years. When they pulled apart, neither of them spoke for a while. They simply stayed there together while rain painted silver streaks across the sleeping city below. And for the first time in a very long time, Jungkook no longer felt alone. Not because the world had become kinder, not because the rumors disappeared, but because Jimin was still beside him, and somehow, that was enough.